So the polite way to describe official estimates of the size of the BP oil disaster is fungible. The not polite way to describe those estimates is funny. Not funny, haha, but funny as in funny screwed up.
Now we know that about 1,000 barrels a day leaking from the actual well.
We knew that there was about 1,000 barrels a day leaking. They say now that NOAA believes that that number could be 5,000 barrels, and there's another place that's actually leaking.
They now estimate that, contrary to your early estimates, it's not 5,000 barrels of oil leaking into the Gulf from this well every day. They estimate it's between 12 and 19,000 barrels per day.
So it started as 1,000 to 5,000 barrels. That was in April. By the next month, it was 12 to 19,000 barrels. By the month after that, it was 35 to a max of 60,000 barrels per day. Now, new estimate, 62,000 barrels a day. It's like watching the cost of your new kitchen over the course of the remodeling. Up, 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 up. But we've got the new estimate of how much has been spilling, the resultant new estimate of how much in total has spilled in the Gulf, and that set the stage for the weirdest news day yet in the BP oil disaster. Today was the day we were told that the oil is gone. Gone. The government reported today that about 75% of the oil has essentially been taken care of, or is well on the way to being taken care of in one way or another. Now, on the one hand, great. On the other hand, the report says about a quarter of all the oil was sucked up through the cap, or skimmed, or burned. Another quarter of the oil was naturally dispersed through Mother Nature's kind, warm, wavy waves. And a little less than a quarter of the oil was dispersed not just by warm water and waves, but through human operations, meaning a titanic volume of chemical dispersants whose long-term effects are unknown. According to the report of 2010, the remaining 26% of the oil is stuck in the Gulf Coast, on the surface of the ocean in the form of tar balls, or washed into the marshlands and beaches and buried in the sand. The report says this residual 26% is in the process of being degraded. And when you were talking about a 5 million barrel disaster, that 26% of course means there's a lot of degrading to hope for. Joining us now live from Venice, Louisiana is NBC News Chief Environmental Affairs Correspondent Ann Thompson. Ann, thanks very much for joining us tonight.
Oh, it's a pleasure, Rachel.
And how is the news from the administration being received down in Venice on how much oil is left in the Gulf?
I would say it's being received with a healthy dose of skepticism. These are people who go out every day into the waters of the Gulf as members of the Vessel of Opportunity program here, and they are seeing oil primarily near shore. They're not seeing as much oil come onshore as they have, but it's still here. There are still tar balls washing up on sandbars. There's still plenty of oil in marshes here in Venice and up in Barataria Bay. The oil has not disappeared. But the other thing is that there's just a lack of trust on this issue. I mean, as you pointed out, when this crisis started, first they were told there was no leak, then there was a leak. It was 1,000 to 5,000 barrels a day. Then there were several different estimates. And even with the latest flow rate estimate, they say it started leaking at a rate of 62,000 barrels a day. It finished at 53,000 barrels a day. The question is, how do you know? What do you really know? And the government said today what this report really gives is a snapshot, if you will, of where they think the 4.9 million barrels went. But more than a snapshot, it really just raises more questions, because for all that oil that's dispersed, where does it go? What do all those tiny little droplets do? And those are questions no one can answer yet.
Are you also hearing concerns voiced about the long-term impact of dispersants? That's one thing that I know a lot of fishermen, when I was down there, were talking to me about, and the government essentially still saying now, yeah, they're doing long-term studies, but they don't know.
Right, very much so. Yesterday, the EPA came out with its second phase of study looking at the dispersant issue. They tested all 8 dispersants that are available on the market. They mixed them with Louisiana sweet crude, which is what spilled here. And they said they found that the oil and the dispersants mixed together were no more toxic than the oil itself. Well, it's sort of like good news, bad news. That's okay, except that oil is toxic. So it doesn't mean that it is harmless, and that's just in the short-term situation. They don't know the long-term impacts, and that's what really scares people here, because it's not just that they've lost their ability to fish for 107 days, actually probably 100 days of the crisis. But the question is, will those fish be back? Some of them have short reproductive cycles. Some of them have very long reproductive cycles. And it may be decades before we get a complete picture of what this spill did to this very rich marine life here in the Gulf of Mexico.
Not only what it did to the marine life, but also the legal implications, the legal liability for BP in terms of taking care of these people and making the fisheries and making the people who make their living on the fisheries whole. It's an incredible problem. One last question for you, Ann. We've heard tonight that Thad Allen has authorized BP to cement the damaged well. This is not the relief well, it's the static kill. Essentially, the bottom line, does this mean that we should expect no more leaking oil until they get that relief well down there now in a pretty permanent way?
Yes, they feel very confident that with the success of the static kill and putting all that drilling mud through the blowout preventer and forcing the oil back down through the pipe and into the reservoir, that no more oil from the Macondo well will leak into the Gulf of Mexico. They are going to, as an insurance move, they are going to pour cement the same way they did with the mud down the top of the well and put a cement plug at the top of the well. However, they still have to do the relief well. Thad Allen has said all along, even if they plug the well at the top, they still had to plug it from the bottom, because it is only then when he will consider this well permanently shut in. Rachel?
NBC News Chief Environmental Affairs Correspondent Ann Thompson, braving the bugs and the heat and the humidity in the late hour for us. And thank you so much. I really appreciate it.
Take care, Rachel.
Indeed.